There is a country where time didn't stop. It split in two and kept moving in both directions at once. On one side, shrines that have stood for 1,000 years. On the other, towers that scrape the clouds, a place where silence and noise share the same street corner. This is Japan, and today we peel back its layers one by one. Welcome to Earth Unveiled. Let's begin. There is a country where bullet trains run beside 1,000-year-old shrines, where silence and neon exist on the same street corner. A nation rebuilt from ash that now leads the world in invention, yet still bows to the changing of the seasons. This is Japan, an archipelago of 4 main islands and thousands of smaller ones, where the old never quite leaves and the new never stops arriving. Over the next half hour, we'll cross this country end to end, from the glowing towers of Tokyo to the snow-buried rooftops of the north, from a city that remembers a single morning in 1945 to coral reefs in the south, where the war never reached at all. We begin in the capital. Tokyo is home to more than 37 million people when you count its surrounding cities, the largest metropolitan area on Earth, and yet it runs with an order that seems almost impossible at this scale. At Shibuya Crossing, as many as 3,000 pedestrians can cross at once in every direction without a single collision. It's been called organized chaos, but there's nothing chaotic about it. Just a culture that has learned, generation after generation, how to move through shared space without stepping on anyone's toes, literally or otherwise. A few stops away, Akihabara tells a different story. Once an electronics market built from the rubble of war, it's now the beating heart of Japan's anime, gaming, and pop culture industries. Entire buildings dedicated to one comic series, one console, one collector's obsession. And when night falls, the city's other face appears. Rainbow Bridge ties Tokyo Bay together in light. Container ships drift beneath it. And from above, you can see why this city has inspired more films, more songs, and more imagined futures than almost any place on the planet. Tokyo isn't trying to impress you. It simply is what happens when 50 different eras of history are asked to share one address. If Tokyo is Japan's pulse, Kyoto is its memory. For more than 1,000 years, this city was the imperial capital. And it still holds on to that role today, not politically, but spiritually. At Ryo-en-ji, 15 stones sit on a bed of raked white gravel, and depending on where you stand, you can never see all 15 at once. Monks have debated for centuries whether that's the point. Nearby, the Golden Pavilion, covered quite literally in gold leaf, sits over its reflecting pond so precisely that on a still morning, it's hard to tell where the building ends and the water begins. Walk into the Arashiyama bamboo grove, and the modern world disappears. Stalks taller than telephone poles bend in the wind with a sound unlike anything else in nature, somewhere between rustling paper and tuned percussion. It's no surprise this grove appears in more films and photographs than almost any other single image of Japan. And in the old quarter of Gion, you may still catch a glimpse of a geiko in full dress, hurrying between appointments, a profession of music, conversation, and artistry that has survived war, modernization, and 4 centuries of changing taste, almost entirely unchanged. South of Kyoto lies Nara. Japan's first true capital and home to over 1,000 wild deer that roam freely through the city's largest park. Local legend holds that these deer are messengers of the gods, which may be why, centuries ago, killing one was punishable by death. Today, visitors feed them rice crackers, and the deer, in turn, have learned to bow for them, whether out of habit, instinct, or a very long-running joke on the local wildlife's part. No one is entirely sure. Beyond the park, more than 2,000 stone lanterns line the approach to Kasuga Shrine, slowly disappearing into moss and shadow. Twice a year, every single one is lit by hand, turning the forest path into a corridor of fire that hasn't changed in over 1,000 years. And at the center of it all stands Todaiji, for centuries the largest wooden building on Earth, built to house a bronze Buddha statue so large that a small car could comfortably sit in one of its hands. 2 hours from Kyoto's quiet temples, Osaka feels like a different country entirely.
Oh, I'm like
Where Kyoto bows, Osaka shouts. Where Kyoto whispers tradition, Osaka grills it on a hot plate and serves it with a smile. Dotonbori is the city's nervous system after dark. A canal lined with neon so dense it reflects in the water like a second skyline. Above it all, a runner has been mid-stride on the Glyco sign since 1935, watching over a street famous for cheap food and loud laughter in equal measure. This is where takoyaki, octopus dumplings, were invented, and where okonomiyaki, a savory cabbage pancake, is treated with the same seriousness Kyoto reserves for tea ceremony. Above the noise, Osaka Castle still stands, rebuilt more than once after fire and war, but holding its ground in the same spot since the 1580s. A quiet reminder that even Japan's loudest city has deep roots. Some places ask to be photographed. Hiroshima asks to be remembered. On the 6th of August, 1945, this city became the first in history to experience nuclear war. The building, now known as the Atomic Bomb Dome, was less than 200 meters from the blast center, and somehow its skeletal frame survived, deliberately left standing ever since, as the city's promise to the rest of the world: never again. Each year, thousands of paper cranes arrive here, folded by school children and visitors alike, inspired by a young girl named Sadako, who believed folding 1,000 cranes might cure her illness. She didn't finish in time. Others have been finishing on her behalf for 70 years. And each August, lanterns are set adrift on the river at dusk, one for every soul the city lost, a quiet, floating constellation of grief and hope, drifting toward the sea. A short ferry ride away, Miyajima Island offers something gentler. Wild deer wander its shoreline as casually as house cats. And at low tide, you can walk out to the base of the island's famous floating Torii Gate, a gateway that for centuries was meant to be approached only by boat, so that visitors would arrive at the sacred shrine beyond it, already humbled by the sea. No single image represents Japan quite like this one. Mount Fuji rises 3,776 meters above sea level. Still technically an active volcano, though it hasn't erupted since 1707, and on a clear, windless morning, its reflection appears in the lakes around its base so perfectly that photographers will wait days, sometimes weeks, for the right 15 minutes of stillness. Around Lake Kawaguchi, wooden rowboats sit idle on the shoreline, autumn maples burning red and orange along the water's edge. Pilgrims have been climbing Fuji's slopes for over 1,000 years, and the Japanese saying still holds true today. A wise man climbs Fuji once. Only a fool climbs it twice. Travel north, past Honshu's farthest edge, and Japan changes character entirely. Hokkaido is the country's last true frontier, colder, wilder, and far less crowded than the south. Winters here can bury entire towns under several meters of snow, and the island is famous for producing some of the lightest, driest powder snow found anywhere on the planet. But the cold has its own reward. Scattered across Hokkaido are hundreds of natural hot springs, onsen, heated by the same volcanic activity that built the rest of the country. Sitting shoulder deep in nearly 40-degree water while snow falls silently onto your hair is, by wide agreement, one of the most purely Japanese experiences there is. Nature and comfort working in quiet partnership. 2 hours north of Tokyo, Nikko hides one of Japan's most photographed crossings. The Shinkyo, or Sacred Bridge, its lacquered red arc set against a backdrop of cedar forest that changes color with every season. Legend says a deity once crossed the river here on the backs of 2 giant serpents, which is as good an explanation as any for a bridge this dramatically placed. Beyond it, a stone path climbs into the forest, flanked by lanterns and cedars that have stood since the early 1600s, planted, according to local history, 1 tree at a time by worshippers honoring the shogun buried at the shrine above. Tucked into a mountain valley, far from any major city, Shirakawa-go looks almost untouched by time. Its farmhouses are built in a style called gashozukuri, steep, thatched roofs shaped like 2 hands pressed together in prayer, engineered specifically to shed the region's brutal winter snowfall. Some of these homes are over 250 years old, still lived in, still heated the traditional way, and the entire village is protected today as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Proof that in Japan, preserving the past isn't a museum exhibit, it's simply someone's address. And finally, far south of everything we've seen so far, closer in fact to Taiwan than to Tokyo, lies Okinawa. While the mainland was being shaped by samurai and shoguns, this chain of islands was its own kingdom for centuries, with its own language, its own customs, and a noticeably slower pace of life that locals still protect fiercely today. Below the surface, The surrounding waters hold some of the healthiest coral reefs left in East Asia, home to species found almost nowhere else in the country. It's a part of Japan that feels quite deliberately like a different world. Proof that even after 1,000 miles of bullet trains and neon and ancient cedar forests, this country still has one more surprise saved for last. Tokyo's neon, Kyoto's silence, Hiroshima's memory, Okinawa's reefs. On paper, they barely look like the same country. But that, in the end, is the answer. Japan was never one single thing. It's a nation that rebuilt itself from ash twice in 1 century and still found room to argue over 15 rocks in a garden. Ancient and modern aren't opposites here. They're neighbors, sharing a fence, and somehow, after 1,000 years, still getting along.